In the quiet African village of Nibiri, there lived a kind farmer named Kwame and his gentle wife, Amina. They had been married for many years, but their home remained empty. Every morning before the sun rose, Kwame walked to the old baobab tree that stood near the edge of the fields. He knelt down, his hands lifted toward the sky, and whispered the same prayer again and again. "Lord, bless me with a child," he would say softly. "Even one child who can call me father." The villagers often saw him there and shook their heads sadly. They respected Kwame and Amina because they were hard-working and kind to everyone. But in a place where family meant everything, a home without children was seen as incomplete. Some people even whispered that the gods had forgotten them. Amina tried to stay strong. She worked beside her husband every day, planting millet and maize under the hot sun. When children passed by laughing and playing, she smiled at them but felt a deep ache inside. At night, she sometimes cried quietly so Kwame would not hear. Yet he knew. He felt the same emptiness, the same longing that grew heavier each year. One evening, as the sky turned red with sunset, Kwame sat outside their small hut. He looked at the horizon where smoke rose from other homes. Laughter echoed from the distance. Families eating together, parents calling their children to come inside. The sound made his chest tighten. He whispered again, "Even one, Lord? Just one." Amina came to sit beside him. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder and said, "Maybe God is still testing us, Kwame. We must keep faith." Kwame nodded, though his heart was tired. He had visited every healer in nearby villages. He had offered sacrifices, prayed in churches, and even fasted for days. Still nothing changed. Some nights, he dreamed of a small boy running toward him, calling Baba. But when he reached out, the child faded like smoke. Those dreams left him both hopeful and broken. One day, while working in the fields, Kwame saw a group of children chasing butterflies. Their laughter filled the air. He stopped his hoe and watched them for a long time. His heart twisted in pain and love at the same time. When one of the children, a small boy named Tendo, waved at him, Kwame smiled weakly and waved back. Later that night, Kwame sat alone outside their hut. The moon was bright, lighting the fields like silver. He spoke aloud, though no one was there. "What is wrong with me, Lord? Have I done something to anger you? Why do you let others have what I ask for?" His voice trembled as he spoke. Inside, Amina listened. Tears rolled down her face. She stepped outside and sat beside him. "Kwame," she said gently, "maybe the child will come in a way we do not expect." Kwame sighed. "I do not know how much longer I can wait. My beard grows gray. My heart feels empty. I see fathers teaching their sons to farm, and I wonder if I will ever have that joy." Amina touched his hand. "Even if we never have a child, Kwame, you are still a good man. You have love to give. Maybe that is what matters most." He looked at her and smiled sadly. "You speak with hope, Amina. But hope alone does not fill this house." Still, the next morning, before the roosters crowed, Kwame rose again and went to the baobab tree. The air was cool and mist covered the fields. He knelt down and prayed like always. But this time, as he finished, a soft wind blew through the branches, and he felt something different. A strange peace in his heart, as if the earth itself had whispered back to him. That night, Amina had a dream. She saw a baby lying in a basket by their door, wrapped in white cloth. The baby smiled at her and reached out its tiny hands. When she tried to hold him, she woke up suddenly. Her heart was pounding, but she felt warmth instead of fear. She believed it was a sign, a promise that their prayers had been heard. The next day, Amina told Kwame about the dream. "I saw the child we have been praying for," she said with shining eyes. "He was here, Kwame. I know it." Kwame listened quietly. For the first time in many months, a small smile appeared on his face. "Then maybe," he said slowly, "the time is near." Days passed, and though nothing happened yet, the dream filled their home with hope. Kwame worked in the fields with new energy. He laughed again, even sang softly while he worked. Amina prepared extra food every evening, saying, "We must be ready to share when the blessing comes." Their neighbors noticed the change. "The farmer smiles again," they said. "Maybe his prayers will soon be answered." Each morning, the sound of Kwame's prayer rose once more from under the baobab tree, steady and full of faith. He no longer sounded desperate. He sounded grateful, as if thanking God for something unseen. And though the child had not yet come, in that moment, peace returned to their hearts. They did not know that destiny was already on its way, that the answer to their prayers would arrive in a form neither of them expected, changing their lives forever. It was a quiet evening in the village of Nibiri. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky with shades of gold and orange. Kwame and Amina sat outside their small hut, resting after a long day of work. The air was warm and the sound of crickets filled the silence. Suddenly they heard footsteps on the dusty path. Amina looked up and saw a woman walking slowly toward them. Her clothes were torn and she looked tired. In her arms she carried a small baby wrapped in an old piece of cloth. The woman's face was lined with dust and sorrow. When she reached them she bowed her head and said softly, "Please? I need your help." Kwame stood up quickly, surprised. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Lami," she said. "I have been traveling for 2 days. This child's mother died soon after he was born. Before she died she told me to find someone kind to raise him. I was told that you are good people." Amina stepped closer and looked at the baby. The child was small and weak, but his eyes were bright. He looked at her and made a small sound like a sigh. Amina's heart melted. She reached out and touched his tiny hand. "He is so beautiful," she whispered. But Kwame frowned. "Why bring him here?" he said. "We do not even know where he came from. We are not his family." Lami looked down sadly. "I know," she said. "But I was told that you have prayed for a child for many years. I believe this child is meant for you." Kwame turned away. "I prayed for my own blood," he said firmly. "Not for another man's child." Amina felt tears fill her eyes. She looked at her husband and said softly, "Kwame, maybe this is how God has chosen to answer us. We asked for a child and now one has come to our door." Kwame shook his head. "No, this is not what I asked for. I cannot take him." The woman sighed deeply. She looked tired, as if she could not walk another step. "Then please," she said, "keep him for one night. I have no food left and I cannot travel farther today. I will rest and go in the morning." Amina looked at her husband again. He did not answer, so she gently took the baby from the woman's arms. The child was warm and light. His small fingers curled around hers, and she felt a strange peace fill her heart. That night, as the baby slept beside her, Amina could not stop watching him. He looked peaceful, his chest rising and falling slowly. When she touched his cheek, he smiled in his sleep. She whispered, "You are special. You came when we had lost hope." The next morning Amina woke early. The woman Lami was packing her few belongings. "I must go now," she said quietly. "My journey continues." Amina asked, "What will happen to the child?" Lami looked at the baby lovingly. "He was born under the same moon you prayed beneath," she said. "He does not belong to me anymore. I believe he belongs to you." Then she placed her hand on Amina's shoulder, gave a tired smile and walked away down the road. When Kwame woke he saw the baby sleeping in the basket near the fire. "You kept him?" he asked sharply. Amina nodded. "He had no one else. I could not send him away." Kwame frowned and stepped outside, angry and confused. He stood under the baobab tree where he had prayed for so many years. His heart was full of pride and pain. "Why, Lord?" he whispered. "Why send me another man's son when I begged for my own?" Inside the hut, Amina held the baby close. She decided to name him Kato, meaning second chance. "You are our second chance," she said softly. Days turned into weeks and the baby grew stronger. He laughed often and filled the house with joy. The neighbors came to see him and everyone admired his bright eyes and cheerful smile. They told Kwame he was lucky, but Kwame never smiled back. He kept his distance, spending longer hours in the fields and returning home late. At night, when the baby cried, Amina would wake and sing softly until he slept again. Sometimes she would glance at Kwame lying beside her, his back turned, his eyes closed tightly. She knew he was awake, listening but saying nothing. One day Amina found Kwame watching Kato from afar. The boy was playing with small stones in the dust, laughing. His laughter filled the air like music. Amina smiled and said, "He looks just like you when you were young." Kwame frowned. "He is not mine," he said coldly. "Do not say such things." But even as he spoke, something inside him shifted. There was something about the child, his smile, his laughter, that touched a hidden part of his heart. He quickly turned away, refusing to admit it. Time passed. Kato began to crawl, then to walk. He followed Amina everywhere, calling her Mama, in his small, soft voice. But when Kwame came near, he would stop and stare, unsure. He felt the cold wall between them even at his young age. Amina often prayed quietly at night. "Lord," she said, "you gave us this gift. Please open Kwame's heart to see what I see." But Kwame's pride remained strong. He could not bring himself to accept the boy. In his mind, Kato was a reminder of what he did not have. His own child, his own blood. Yet, no matter how hard he tried to stay distant, Cato's laughter filled the home with warmth. The little boy grew healthier and happier each day, running through the fields, chasing butterflies, and bringing Amina flowers he picked by the stream. Even the neighbors said, "This child brings light wherever he goes." One afternoon, Kwame came home early and saw Amina and Cato sitting by the fire. The boy was giggling as Amina told him a story. For the first time, Kwame watched quietly without anger. The sight of them together stirred something deep within him, a feeling he could not name. He turned away quickly and muttered to himself, "He is just a child. That is all." But deep down, his heart had already begun to change. He just did not know it yet. And though he still called Cato the boy instead of my son, the seed of love had been planted quietly, like a small tree growing unseen under the earth, waiting for its time to bloom. Cato grew up strong and full of life. The boy who once fit in Amina's arms now ran through the village with laughter that made everyone smile. He had a bright spirit and a kind heart. Each morning, he helped his mother fetch water from the stream, carrying the small pot carefully on his head. He worked beside her in the garden, planting beans and sweeping the compound. When he saw old people walking with heavy loads, he ran to help them without being asked. Everyone in the village loved him. "That child was sent by God," they often said. "He brings light wherever he goes." But not everyone felt that light. Kwame, his father, still kept his heart closed. Though the boy greeted him each morning with respect, Kwame rarely smiled back. When Cato brought him food in the fields, Kwame would take it silently and say nothing. Sometimes he even looked away, pretending to be busy. Cato did not understand why. He often asked Amina, "Mama, why does father not smile at me? Did I do something wrong?" Amina's heart would ache every time she heard those words. She would hug him tightly and whisper, "No, my son. You did nothing wrong. Your father just needs time." But years passed and nothing changed. The wall between father and son grew taller. Cato loved the farm. He liked to walk with Kwame to the fields at sunrise, when the grass was still wet with dew. He carried his small hoe proudly and tried to copy everything his father did. But even then Kwame kept his distance. He spoke only when necessary. "Do it this way," he would say coldly, "or you missed a spot." One day Cato was helping to gather maize. He worked hard, his hands quick and steady. When the work was done, he ran to Kwame and said with a bright smile, "Father, look. I did the whole row by myself." Kwame looked at the line of harvested maize, nodded once and said, "You forgot that side." Then he turned away. Cato's smile faded. He looked down at his dusty feet, biting his lip to stop the tears. Amina saw this from a distance and her eyes filled with sadness. That night, she spoke softly to her husband. "Kwame," she said, "why do you still hold back your heart? The boy calls you father, but you treat him like a stranger." Kwame frowned and said, "He is not my blood, Amina. You know this. I cannot forget." Amina sighed deeply. "Does love need blood to be real? This boy works for you, prays for you, and smiles at you every day. Yet you push him away." Kwame stood up and walked outside. The moonlight fell on his tired face. "You do not understand," he said quietly. "Every time I look at him, I remember that God did not give me my own son." From that day on, Amina prayed harder than ever. She asked God to soften her husband's heart. She believed that one day Kwame would see Cato not as another man's child, but as the gift he truly was. Cato, though still young, could feel the pain in his home. He tried harder to please his father. He carved small wooden animals and left them by Kwame's bed. He fetched water for him, cleaned his tools, and worked even when tired. But nothing seemed to change. One afternoon, while working in the fields, Cato cut his hand on a sharp stone. Blood ran down his wrist and he cried out. Kwame looked up but did not move. Amina rushed to the boy and wrapped his hand with a cloth. "Go home and rest," she said. Cato shook his head. "No, Mama. Father needs me here." He turned back to his work, holding the hoe with his injured hand. Kwame saw this but said nothing. Still, something stirred inside him, a strange feeling he had not known in years. As days went by, the boy continued to show love even when it was not returned. When Kwame was sick with fever, Cato stayed by his side, wiping his forehead with a wet cloth. When Kwame's crops began to fail, Cato prayed for rain every night. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Amina told a story about forgiveness. Cato listened carefully, his eyes bright. When she finished, he said, "Mama, I will never stop loving father even if he never loves me." Amina looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You have a heart bigger than any man I know," she whispered. Kwame, who had been sitting outside, heard the words through the open door. They struck him like a hammer. He sat still for a long time, unable to speak. The next morning, Cato woke before sunrise and ran to the stream to fetch water. On his way he sang softly, a simple song about hope and love. The sound floated through the air and reached Kwame's ears as he stood near the fields. For a moment he closed his eyes and listened. Something inside him began to soften, but his pride held him back. He could not bring himself to call Cato my son. He told himself that love was weakness, that he was only doing what was right by keeping his distance. Yet, deep in his heart, the truth was different. He cared for the boy, though he could not admit it. When Cato came home late from helping an old woman in the village, Kwame scolded him harshly, but afterward, he waited at the doorway making sure he was safe. When the boy fell sick with fever, Kwame stayed awake all night, sitting by the fire, listening to his breathing. Amina saw these small things and smiled. "Your heart is changing, Kwame," she whispered one night. But Kwame shook his head. "I do not know what my heart wants anymore." Life in Nibiri went on. The seasons changed, the rains came and went. Cato grew taller, his voice deeper. He began to look more like a young man than a child. The people of the village continued to praise him. "That boy will make his father proud," they said. Kwame said nothing, but each time he heard those words, something inside him twisted. He wanted to be proud. He wanted to reach out and hold the boy he had raised. But years of bitterness had built walls he could not easily break. Still, there were moments, small, quiet moments, when their eyes met and for a heartbeat something passed between them. A connection, fragile but real. The love was there, hidden beneath the pain, waiting for the right moment to be seen. And though Cato did not know it, the distance between him and his father was slowly closing, like a long road that finally began to lead home. The night began quietly. The air was still and the moon hid behind dark clouds. Kwame had gone to the fields near the river to check his animal traps before the rain came. Amina told him to wait until morning, but he shook his head. "If the rain is strong, the traps will wash away," he said. Cato was helping Amina close the windows of the hut when he saw the sky turn black. The wind started to rise, bending the trees and carrying dust through the air. Amina looked worried. "Your father has not returned," she said softly. Cato looked toward the river, where flashes of lightning lit the sky. "I will go and bring him home," Cato said. Amina grabbed his arm. "No, the storm is too strong. He will come back." But Cato shook his head. "I cannot wait. He might be in danger." Before she could stop him, he ran into the night. The rain began to fall, slow at first, then heavy and wild. The wind howled through the village, tearing leaves from trees and shaking the roofs. The path to the river was slippery, but Cato ran as fast as he could, his bare feet splashing through puddles. Lightning flashed again, showing him the way. When he reached the riverbank, he saw nothing at first, only dark water and bending reeds. Then, over the roar of the rain, he heard a voice calling weakly, "Help! Help!" It was Kwame. Cato's heart raced. He looked and saw his father clinging to a branch in the rushing river. The water was high and fierce, pulling everything in its path. Without thinking, Cato jumped in. The cold water hit him like ice, but he fought against the current, kicking and pushing with all his strength. "Father! Hold on!" he shouted. Kwame turned and saw him. "No, go back!" he cried. "You'll drown." But Cato didn't stop. He swam harder, his small arms cutting through the dark water. The current pushed him under, but he came up again, gasping for air. He reached for the branch, grabbed it and held tight beside his father. "Take my hand," Cato shouted. Kwame hesitated, but then their hands met. Cato pulled with all his strength, guiding his father toward the shore. The river fought them, dragging them backward, but the boy refused to let go. Step by step they struggled toward safety. When they finally reached the bank, both of them fell to the ground, gasping and shivering. The rain still poured down, cold and hard. Cato crawled closer to his father, his body weak and trembling. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. Kwame looked at the boy, his chest rising and falling fast. He could hardly believe what had happened. His son, the child he had refused to love, had risked his life to save him. For a long moment, Kwame said nothing. He only stared at Cato's face, pale and tired in the flashes of lightning. Then, slowly he reached out and pulled the boy close. "My son," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Forgive me." Cato looked up at him with tired eyes and gave a small smile. "There is nothing to forgive, father," he said. "I only wanted to help you." Kwame's tears mixed with the rain as he held the boy tighter. "I was blind," he said softly. "I prayed for a child and God sent me you. I pushed you away and still you saved me. The storm roared around them, but inside, something quiet and powerful was happening. Years of pain melted away in that moment. The wall between them was gone. After some time, Cato began to shake from the cold. Kwame helped him stand and supported him all the way back home. The wind blew against them, but they moved slowly, step by step, until they reached the door. Amina ran out when she saw them. "Oh, thank God," she cried. She wrapped a blanket around Cato and helped Kwame inside. "What happened?" she asked. Kwame looked at her, his voice full of emotion. "He saved my life," he said. "Our son saved me." Amina covered her mouth, tears running down her cheeks. She hugged Cato tightly and whispered a prayer of thanks. Later that night, when the storm had passed and the house was quiet again, Kwame sat beside Cato's bed. The boy was sleeping, his breathing soft and slow. Kwame watched him for a long time, thinking of all the years he had wasted. He remembered the first time he saw the baby in Amina's arms, the anger he felt, the pride that stopped him from loving. Now he saw clearly. He realized that love was not about blood, it was about the heart. He reached out and touched Cato's hand gently. "You are my son," he whispered. "From now until my last breath." Outside, the rain had stopped and the moon came out again, shining over the wet village. The air was fresh and calm, as if the world itself had been washed clean. From that night on, things began to change. Kwame no longer called Cato the boy. He called him my son. He taught him how to plant, how to fish, and how to pray. They worked together, laughed together, and ate side by side. The villagers soon noticed the change. "Kwame and his son are always together now," they said. "It is good to see." And though the storm had brought fear and danger, it also brought healing. It had broken not just branches and roofs, but the pride that had once lived in Kwame's heart. As the days went by, the bond between father and son grew stronger. Whenever Kwame looked at Cato, he remembered that night by the river and the words that had changed everything. "My son, forgive me." Those words stayed in his heart forever, a reminder that love, once found, must never be lost again. From the day of the storm, Kwame was no longer the same man. Something inside him had changed forever. He looked at Cato with new eyes, eyes that saw love instead of difference, joy instead of pride. The anger and bitterness that had lived in his heart for years were gone, washed away by the river that had nearly taken his life. Every morning, Kwame and Cato now worked side by side in the fields. The people of Nibiri were surprised to see them together, laughing and talking like true father and son. The boy who had once been ignored was now treated with care and pride. When someone praised Cato for his hard work, Kwame smiled and said, "He is my son. God gave him to me." The villagers often stopped to listen when Kwame spoke. He would tell them, "Sometimes we ask God for blessings, but when they come, we do not recognize them. I prayed for a child, and when God sent me one, I almost rejected him. I was blind, but now I see." Cato grew into a fine young man. He was gentle but strong, humble but wise. He learned everything his father taught him: how to farm, how to fish, how to trade at the market. But most of all, he learned how to forgive. No matter how much pain he had felt as a child, he never showed bitterness. Instead, he loved his father even more. Amina often watched them from a distance, her heart full of happiness. For years she had prayed for peace in her home, and now her prayers had finally been answered. Every evening, when the three of them sat together by the fire, she would smile and thank God silently. One afternoon, Kwame and Cato went to the market to sell their produce. The villagers greeted them warmly. An old man named Jabo stopped them and said, "Kwame, we used to see you walk alone to the fields. Now you never go without your son. You are blessed." Kwame smiled and nodded. "Yes, old friend. I was foolish once, but God opened my eyes." Cato looked up at him proudly. "Father always says that blessings do not always look like we expect," he said. The old man laughed. "Wise words, young one. You must never forget them." As time passed, people from nearby villages came to hear their story. It became well known throughout Nibiri, the story of the man who prayed for a child and the boy who taught him what love truly meant. Parents told their children about it, reminding them to be grateful for what they had and to love without pride. One evening, Kwame sat under the baobab tree where he had once cried out for a child. The sun was setting and the air was calm. Cato came and sat beside him, placing a basket of fruit between them. For a moment they said nothing. Then Kwame spoke softly. "I used to come here every morning and ask God to give me a son," he said. "I thought he had forgotten me. But now I know he was only waiting for the right time." Cato smiled. "Maybe God was also waiting for your heart to be ready," he said gently. Kwame laughed quietly. Perhaps you are right. You have taught me more than I ever taught you. They sat together in silence, watching the orange sky fade into night. The wind whispered through the branches of the old tree, and for the first time Kwame felt complete. He had everything he had ever asked for, not in the way he expected but in the way he needed. As the seasons changed, Cato grew into a man and began to help others in the village. He built small huts for widows, fixed broken wells, and taught young boys how to farm. People respected him deeply, calling him the heart of Nibiri. And wherever he went, Kwame walked proudly beside him. Sometimes, travelers passing through the village asked about the tall young man who worked so hard and the older farmer who always smiled beside him. The villagers would tell them, "That is Kwame and his son Cato." Their story reminds us that love is stronger than blood. Years later, when Kwame grew old and his hair turned white, he often sat by the fire with Amina and Cato. He told stories to the village children, who gathered around him to listen. His favorite story was his own. "I once prayed for a child," he would say, his voice soft but steady. "I prayed every day for years. But when the child came, I refused him. I thought he was not mine because he was not born from my blood. I was wrong. He was sent by God himself. I almost lost my blessing because my heart was closed. Do not make the same mistake. When love knocks on your door, open it." The children always listened with wide eyes, and Cato would smile quietly beside him. One evening, after telling the story again, Kwame turned to his son. "Cato," he said, "if I leave this world tomorrow, I will go with peace. You have given my life meaning." Cato held his father's hand and said softly, "No, father. You gave me love. That is all I ever wanted." Amina watched them with tears in her eyes. The firelight danced across their faces, warm and gentle. She knew that their story would live on long after they were gone. As the night grew quiet, Kwame looked up at the stars. He remembered the years of pain, the prayers under the baobab tree, the storm, and the moment he found his son's love. He smiled and whispered, "God answers in his own way." The village of Nibiri continued to tell their story for generations. The story of a man who prayed for a child and the boy who taught him what love truly meant. It became a story of hope, forgiveness, and faith. And whenever the wind blew through the baobab tree, it carried their memory through the village. A gentle reminder that blessings often come in ways we do not expect, and love, once found, can heal even the deepest wounds.